That's right. If you see a Malcolm Tent record filling your screen, there can only be one thing behind it, and that would be the man himself, Malcolm Tent. Hi, guys. Bringing you this week's episode of Tent Talks Tunes. Normally you get to see me here ruminating and masticating and chewing the fat about records. Of course, one of them being one of my favorite records of all time, the Multiple Moods of Malcolm Tent. 14 original hits, 14 original artists. Just look at all those original hits and all those original artists. Gosh dang, so many of them. Everybody from They Hate Us to the Bunny Brains to Anti-Scene to something that's allegedly The Residents to lots of bands featuring me. And so I always like to grab you, my captive audience, by the ear and inform you that this record is not only really incredible and not only really excellent and not only gets my complete unabashed endorsement, it's also oddly enough for sale. Yes, I do like to sell these things, and I do like to make sure that you, the discriminating listener, has one in your collection because you need it. You can find it on Discogs and eBay. You can also go direct to me, Malcolm Tent, the man himself. All you gotta do is pay me $15. $15, post-paid in the US of A. There's my PayPal address, mt@malcolmtent.net. You can also get 1.5 rolls of quarters. Think about what a small amount of money that is. 1.5 rolls of quarters. Put them in a nice, secure, padded envelope and mail me those 15 quarters, or however many it is, 60 quarters, to P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. I will gratefully scoop up those 60 quarters, because that is the right number, put them in my pocket, and send you the Multiple Moods of Malcolm Tent. 14 songs on vinyl, baby. Vinyl! And guess what? What I just said is relevant and germane to the topic we have at hand today. Because we're going to be talking about lots of vinyl with a dude who's been on lots of vinyl. And following up with the first episode we did with Mr. Greg Vegas. Hello, Greg Vegas. Good to have you here. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. It's been a long time.
You know, it seems like it's been just minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes since we last chewed that piece of vegan fat. And we started to get deep into the history of the band you were in, Monsterland.
Well, I also say like you're getting deep into the scene that was sort of around, which obviously, you know, I like revisiting this because obviously you're an important part of that scene as being a catalyst and giving us a place to play in your store and helping us release records and stuff like that. So, you know, I think, again, there's a band without a village behind it, I guess we could say, right?
Yeah, it really does take a village, and you kind of raised that point earlier in the last broadcast we did. You know, without the infrastructure, without having, you know, the Western Connecticut State University with its student body, with its facilities, with the radio station, with the cool local record store, if I do say so myself, not to mention the bands and the odd places to do gigs, there wouldn't be a scene. You know, the scene really is made up of its constituents.
I mean, I kind of think about all of those really talented people that just, you know, are in remote places that never have the catalyst to meet people like ourselves who help them do things, you know, and that's again, like that's the secret of, you know, why one band makes it, or, you know, whatever. There's just a lot of things that kind of come in place. So I think we're the right place. I was in the right place at the right time, and I feel very blessed. And still to this day, use a lot what I've learned of mistakes and successes from back in those days.
Yeah, totally. I'm in the same boat. It's like I'm still in touch with tons and tons and tons of people from you know, those days of our scene and of the record store. And personally, I love it myself because when I go out, you know, I tour. I do an awful lot of touring as a solo acoustic punk rock guy. And there are people from the stores, specifically in the scene generally, all over the place. And so it's really easy to call a former customer or a former scenester in North Carolina or Washington State or New Mexico and say, hey, I'm in town. Got a place to crash? Got a place to play? Yeah, sure. Come on out. Even if a gig doesn't result, there's still a place to, be and something to do with somebody who I already know. It's amazing how much this scene is still much alive and scattered all over the place.
Oh yeah, and me being, and I work in the music business or the music hobby, as I like to call it most times. There's, literally not a week goes by that like someone I deal with is like connected somehow to the scene, my band, seeing Monsterland or being part of the, we're all out there because we're just music people, right? And there's just, and I find it really fascinating, especially being in Brooklyn. There's so many of us that I still see that are from our scene directly, who live down here, and people are like, why do you know him? Oh, I've known him since, 1985 or 86. And you're like, what? Like, it's like, oh, we kind of played together or whatever, it exists. And I think it exists in a lot of places. Obviously, there's a lot of DC scene people around here too. And it's like, they have the same kind of roots, and it's really interesting. So, but yeah, it's like, I'm a real believer in the scene, and I kind of like, as much as like I live in Brooklyn, which is supposed to be like a mecca of whatever, but like I really appreciate that Danbury. Well, I'll say Newtown as well. You live in Newtown. Newtown was much as part of the Danbury scene as much as Brookfield is like the collectively Danbury area, right? Because there was all these people had like garages and basements that we all jammed in, and God bless Joe and Jim's, Roberto's mom for letting us make noise in the basement. And, it's like Darren Lucas and his house the Monsterland Tom lived in and had those parties. So, yeah, we all need the catalyst to make things happen, to say, okay, you can do what you need to do here. We're not going to judge you. Do your thing. You're part of us, right? We all need that somehow,
Yeah, absolutely. And the results speak for themselves. Here we are 30 years later talking about it and living it, and it's great. It's great.
Yeah, it's cool. It's great. It's definitely fun. I appreciate you asking about this, because now I'm trying to remember all of it.
Yeah, well, luckily we've got plenty of visual aids at our disposal. I find that having the records, and I wish I had my flyer archive at my disposal, because I saved, no fooling, every single flyer that ever came through Trash American Style. I saved 1 or 2 copies of and put them in boxes. And I still got all the boxes, but they're in the basement and they're not as organized as they possibly could be. But man, I got every Monsterland flyer that you guys ever put out.
Yeah, and I've been slowly collecting them, as we and digitizing them as when I can. Let's see if I can pull one up here to be my background screen here or something.
Oh yeah, you might want to mention that you have been doing a lot of posting of Monsterland stuff online. Tell people.
Oh yeah, I'm supposed to plug stuff.
Plug, right? You got to plug, dude. Music
you
business.
Can follow it. We're on the Instagrams, as I call it. We're on Instagrams. We're a Monsterland 90s band, and also Facebook. Whatever, Monsterland. I don't remember what it is. Monsterland band, I guess it is. But yeah, I do. I try to keep it alive, because I do. As I'm cleaning up as a pack rat I am, I find up stuff of flyers and all that kind of thing, and I try to share, and it's quite fun. And occasionally we have some audio or whatever that we can share. So definitely follow Monsterland 90s band, and it's fun. It's fun stuff.
And while you're dragging that up, I'm gonna clarify something. We went back and forth a little bit and mentioned in the last episode that we did about how I recorded on audio tape the very first performance of Monsterland before you guys even had a name. My tape box says Greg, Tom, and Chris. There's no band name.
It does.
All I have is the first song from the set, because the tape ran out. And this was back in the day when a blank tape cost $3 and change, and I couldn't afford a blank tape. So that's it. That's all that there actually is of the first ever Monsterland song.
Well, it's probably a good thing, right?
Maybe.
I'm sure.
Maybe.
So let's pull up a few things here. What I got? Is this working? No, my computer's spinning here. I'm trying to pull up a flyer, but anyway, this is reference here.
Oh, looks like something might be happening.
Something. All right, so this is. Oh, it's of course, but this is the first show we did. Why is it backwards? I don't get it. Anyway, it's the GNUFA's. It was Meg's birthday party and night shift. First real show. Let me see there. I don't know. It's why is it backwards? It's really strange to me.
No, it looks good.
I see. I clicked the mirror video. That's why. Okay. This is our night shift show, September 3rd, 1989.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of goofy stuff like that, and then let's see. There's one here. Oh, speaking of the rival, this is a Smile Ahead show at the Ozone, late '89 too.
Looks like something that either Ernie or Jim, probably Jim, drew that one. I'm gonna guess.
Yeah.
Jim Roberto production.
Yep, and that's from courtesy of Joe Snow, I think. And here's the famous Verlaine show. It's not these images aren't really come up so great, but anyway, got lots of these old school images here. Let's see. I think I even have a trash flyer somewhere.
Well, I hope you do. It's good for my ego if you do.
Oh, here we go. Got it. Boom, but you can't really see it there.
Oh, yeah. I know that. Cut and paste, baby. Cut and paste. That's all.
So those are courtesy of Tom. So anyway, yeah, we were called Smile back then. So we were talking before we changed the name, which was at sometime in, I think, 91, I think it was. Maybe it was 90. I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, that's where we left off. Yeah, it must have been 90 because I think it looks like we had shows in later 90 that were Monsterland.
Yeah, cool. That's I always actually have to do a little adjustment on my my screen here. My screen's gotten kind of weird for some reason. Hold on one second. This is live video, people. This is the way it goes when you go live.
I mean, you know, if things weren't weird right now, Malcolm, I'd be worried.
I know. You know, it's just part of the norm. The new normal. You're seeing it here, everybody. The new normal. Yeah, flyers made with scissors, glue, and paper. Imagine that.
Yeah, you know, I've kind of starting to go back to that these days. I'm like, I make stuff all the time, and I'm like really digging that like idea of like, you know, I found some old magazines on the street, and I was like, oh, these would be great, and like, and nowadays you just like scan stuff, but I'm like, I just want to cut these up and paste them. So, yeah, I mean, everything is DIY. Back you start talking about the cost, right? You know, so we didn't have much money, and you know, you figured it out, and luckily technology always helps artists, and Tascam was a great tool for us, you know, to avoid expensive studios with a bunch of hippies who wanted to make it sound like Hendrix or something like that, which back then we didn't really want to sound like Hendrix. Maybe we do now, but
Speak for yourself, buddy.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was kind of coming up our own thing, and it's, you know, fascinating to think about like how we did things, and you know, but even the touring, like, you know, looking back now, like you had some quarters in your pocket, you had a map. You went to the phone booth, you called saying, oh, we're lost because we don't know where we're going. We don't know how to read a map. And you did that, you know, that those are, now it's just like, oh, I just followed the GPS. But like, you know, the adventures of just leaving your town in a van that you probably rented or somebody's car, you know, I was like, wow, you know, it's like, so the excitement of being in this sort of traveling circus of a couple guys trying to make some music, you know, and generally we did, you know, again, we played bands like Head and a lot of friends, so it was kind of fun. We all kind of shared gear sometimes and blew each other's amps up and that kind of thing, you know.
Oh yeah.
And then, you know, didn't thank anybody about for it, so.
Yeah, man, it was really great, and where we left the narrative off at the very end of our first episode. And by the way, if anybody's seeing this for the first time, all episodes of
By the way, this is me when I was in the Doobie. This is me when I was in the Doobie Brothers, by the way.
Oh man, looking good, Greg. That's cool. You should have stayed there, maybe. Episodes of Tent Talks Tunes are all archived on my Facebook page. If you go to the Facebook page, Malcolm Tent, just scroll down. You'll see every single Tent Talks Tunes eventually. And I've also got a YouTube channel, Malcolm Tent. I'm archiving them on YouTube. So if you missed the first episode with Greg, it's there. It's on the internet somewhere. And you can see where we left off. We left off with the manufacture of the very first Monsterland 7-inch, which was a collaboration between my label, TPOS, and our good friend Joe Snow and Monsterland, recorded at home and pressed by the home team.
And a cut and paste album cover, by the way.
Yes. I have the mock-up still somewhere where, the original is actually red construction paper cut out in a starburst pattern. Yep. With the logo cut and glued.
That was high-tech computer audio. We had to go to some like lab, IBM or something like that to get that.
Yeah, right? Truly unbelievable. And it gets even more high-tech as we travel along to the second Monsterland single. Ta-da! Look at that. Get
3D.
Out of My Head. Yeah.
In 3D. I really love that cover, and I don't even remember how it was made, but Tom did all that stuff, but pretty much. But just the cover alone and the back. We'll show the back now. Show the back.
There's the back. If people
which was kind of co-opted from our Buick from Hell days, is just fantastic. I think that's great. I don't even need to listen to it. It looks great.
No, it looks great. It sounds great. This is from winter of 1991, whereas this one was from January of 1991. So we're almost a year forward, and this was recorded at home on the 4-track. This one has actually got far fewer liner notes than your average Monsterland record, or maybe I'm just missing the insert.
There's like a little blue insert. There should have been.
Mine doesn't have it for some reason. I don't know why.
Hold on. We got it.
Vegas has got it. He's got it in his archive. It's sitting somewhere back there. Because Monsterland records typically had lots and lots of info. And the thing that always endeared me to Monsterland is the fact that they always had extensive thank you lists. You can see from the first Monsterland 7-inch insert, lots of thank yous. And lots of props to local bands and local people and local institutions.
Of course, I can't find it, but I do have the image anyway. I can share.
Oh.
We'll do high tech stuff here.
You were just talking about low tech, and now we're doing high tech.
Yeah, I can.
It's crazy.
But one of the things that you might notice, which we'll find out, we always thank the member of Hush Gadoo in our singles.
Yes.
And it was only because we just like Hush Gadoo, and so we'd always thank a different member every single, just randomly. So, we didn't know them or anything. That was what we did because we thought it was fun, and we were very influenced by them, of course.
Well, what's funny is I never even caught on to that one until the third record where you thanked Greg Norton. I was like,
yeah,
okay.
You had to thank Greg, of course. Oh man, I can't find these. I do have it here somewhere. But anyway, it was we always had an insert. I I'm surprised you're missing that insert there.
Yeah, me too. I'm usually pretty much of a completist. I probably have another copy.
And this is all right. Get on my head. Let's see. Where's the insert? I have it here somewhere.
When we stream this live, you're going to be getting a lot of comments from people saying, find the damn insert. Find the insert. Hey, man, thought you was professional. Where's the insert?
Too many files. Too
much monster.
But anyway, yeah, so talk while I look for this. Talk about the single there.
Well, from what I can glean, it was like the first one, recorded at home on the 4-track, but it was actually mixed somewhere for the first time.
Yeah, I remember we went somewhere, tried to be like, we got a record label, and then Rockville Records was putting this out, right?
Yeah, this is the first one that's on a label and mixed at an outside studio, Styles Studio, apparently, what I know nothing about.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but we went there to mix it, and did a pretty good job. Basically, taught us probably what things we can do that we wouldn't have been able to do on, it was mixed on a proper board or something like that. But it definitely fattened it up, put it that way.
Yeah.
And it was, and it came. Rockville was part of Dutch East India's label,
which meant you never got paid. Just saying.
Yeah. Neither did Atlantic either, but.
Well.
Yeah, it was, which was pretty exciting for us. And we had Jeff Packman, was behind this one, and our buddy Sean Maxon, who was from the Danbury scene, and kind of helped get all this going. So yeah, it was pretty exciting for us. So we got a little bit of bigger, try to fatter sound, and went to somebody mixed it, which basically took our 4-track and tried to do something with it.
Yeah.
So it was and it definitely got us our first notice of some reviews and various fanzines, etc. And it was quite exciting for us.
So how did you guys make the contact with the label Rockville Records?
Well, I said Sean, I believe it kind of came through Sean Maxon, maybe. I know, I know it's kind of becoming a blur, but it's all, Matthew Kaplan, we were involved with it was our attorney and kind of acted as manager in many ways. All got us contact. I don't think it actually, Matthew was involved with this, so now I think of it, but it was around this time. But I'm pretty sure it was via Sean meeting up, because we were both interning at Dutch East at one point. So I was at Homestead Records for a second, and Sean was down there. So anyway, somehow we got connected to this cool group of people wanted to put out a record, and probably were like, whatever, just do it.
Yeah, right.
Didn't take much of us to convince us,
Well, you just actually hit on a really key point, and this, I think, is going to come into play, especially as we get later on in the story and you're dealing with a major label, is that you guys had a support team. You had an attorney, which is absolutely critical. And I'm going to guess probably saved you a lot of grief.
Yeah, and I must say, like, Matthew Kaplan he's not wasn't an attorney that probably would have thought of at the time, and the reason why I worked with him, because he was like an indie rock dude like us, and he was, hustling some other indie bands, Our American Cousin, and right now I can't even think of how we connected with him, but probably was through Our American Cousin, because we do people from Connecticut that was involved there. But anyway, he was putting out 7 inches and fanzines and stuff. So, he was kind of the same. He was cut from the same cloth. He was like a guy who was a pro. He knew what he was doing. I remember the Rockville contract. I remember showing to Tom, and I worked at Macy's in Danbury at the time. Both worked in Macy's in the stock room, and and I remember like showing one of the guys who worked in the Macy's. My boss was like an actual lawyer and studying to be like a corporate lawyer, and he looked at the contract for us, because I was like, I don't know any lawyers. You're a lawyer, look at my contract. And he's like, why would you sign this? This is terrible, but anybody would say that, but any music contract, right? And, unless you're a music lawyer, you have to have a different perspective, because music contracts are kind of the opposite what anybody else in the real world would do. Like, you're selling dreams, like you're giving somebody an opportunity. So I'm going to give you a little bit, but take the most, that's basically how every record deal is. No, it gets better because you have good lawyers and stuff, but it's still based on the shittiest fucking deal ever. Right. So it's like, but anyway, so this lawyer was like, why would you do this? But anyway, so we were lucky to meet up with Matt Kaplan, because he kind of kicked it into gear. I think pretty much really getting people to pay attention to this single for us, because we were like, I don't think we were sort of anybody else like aspiring to do great things, but it was cool that we had people talking about us and paying for records. I don't know if we got $500 or something like that for the single. Who knows? But it looks cool. As I said, the single looks cool. It looks cool, but it did get us on the radar though. It's like, it's a great kind of like a lo-fi shoegaze song. So,
Yeah, it's got the hooks, it's got the soaring vocal, and then on the B side you've got what you could say is the other side of Monsterland, the harder, grittier, nastier, with Plastic and Vegas Hate Fuck.
Yeah, and we were sort of there's a bit of the grungy stuff coming out, right? So we were, I was busy listening to probably Lubricated Goat and whatever, Mudhoney or something like. But it was like we were dabbling in those things, and so we had definitely the rawness of that. Probably the side most people don't realize because they heard later records. Here's a review from Maximum Rock and Roll on it. It says, actually, this is from the first single. It says, noisy garage pop with an early Boston feel. I love Boston feel. Instrumental interactions, tense, driven, and energetic, and combined with a cool discordant melodic chords, and that makes it this really good. So we were starting to get some buzz. It was kind of fun.
No, so it did pay to send that single to Maximum Rock and Roll. I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, exactly. And starting to get those reviews were starting to come. It was definitely kind of like, oh, okay, this is how this works,
And that's also part of how we did it with DIY. The only reason Maximum Rock and Roll had that record to interview is because somebody, me, I'm pretty sure, might have been you guys, but somebody took the record, put it in an envelope, and wrote Maximum Rock and Roll, P.O. Box 940, and sent it to them. That's how you got the results. You had to do that kind of legwork and put that elbow grease into it, because no one else is going to do it for you.
Exactly. And again, this is what we both do all the time too, is every day still. So it doesn't really change. So yeah, so things we're getting a little noticed at this point, and that single kind of got out there, and people started talking about it a little bit.
Yeah, because as much as I dislike Dutch East India and their business practice, they've been out of business forever and ever. They were
talk plenty of shit about them.
Yeah, they were, if nothing else, a distributor. Their job was to distribute and to get the stuff out. That's how they made all the money that they put in their pocket, was by selling the product. So when you've got something like this, colored vinyl and great packaging and a record label that actively distributes, you're poised for greatness if you play your cards right.
Well, yeah, it gets things going. But yeah, you gotta keep moving forward. So yeah, so somebody was hustling for us. More people. You were hustling. Now we had Rockville hustling for us. We had Matt Kaplan helping us out, getting things moving, and when things really started to get in motion.
Yeah. And so at this point, we're talking about late 91. You probably still hadn't played too many out-of-town dates other than ones you mentioned before.
I have the list here. I'm going to tell you right now. I have the list right here.
See,
I come prepared for this. I come prepared.
Do you have that list posted anywhere? Is that on?
No, not yet. They should. So what I can tell by this point, and I'm sure I'm missing a handful of shows here, but this is ones I can document. We had played by January 91. We played about maybe 25, 30 shows. And then, it just kept getting more and more and more. So, although 91 is a bit lost, and there's a lot of missing holes here, but yeah, so it's something around like 30 shows at this point have happened.
And mostly local with a few out-of-towners.
Yeah, everything was local. Let's see here. We got 89. We did play in, one of the first shows we played in New York was, did a CMJ showcase, a club called the Hot Rod, 1990, October 9th. And then we did we did a show at the NYU with the band Christmas, who I'm a big fan of. Mm-hmm. And that was on October 29th. So that was, I think, our first time in New York City, if I remember.
Right on. So cool. The momentum's building, and you've got a few road gigs under your belt and a record on Rockville. Now, the sweepstakes get raised a little bit more because it's time to... I'd love to hear the story of how you guys swung this for the next record, which is on a label out of England, Serial Killer Records, the Peanut Butter Karma.
So if I am correct, that we had a review in England for Get Out of My Head, and I know Matt Kaplan was involved with this Serial Killer, where it was like one of the first releases, and a couple cool indie guys. Do I want to put a record on? Of course, we're going to say yes, right? Because it's an English label. So yeah, we started to get a little buzz going on in England, which was definitely pretty interesting. Again, it's all a bit blurry exactly the timing, but at the same time so this is the Peanut Butter Karma single, right? So we had this, and then we also put an American version out on the Spin Art label.
Which we will show the people right now, because we have it right here. It's the U.S. pressing.
Yeah.
Featuring the iconic Angry Girl logo. You can see her over my shoulder
which
as
was
well.
we used much in our T-shirt.
Stupid, ugly American, not my fault, if I recall correctly.
Lazy, stupid American.
Lazy,
yes.
stupid American, not my fault. And
this is like early '92 at this point.
Well, let's get specific because we do have the insert for this one. We've made the quantum leap over to a UK label. Yes, January '92 is when this was recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in an outside studio, Rock House Studios.
Yeah, Morgan Walker in Ridgefield.
Yep.
I think it was Ridgefield, or just outside of Ridgefield. But
I think Ridgefield, down on the 7 corridor.
Yeah, so right, but yeah, we went to. He had this great little 8-track studio that we recorded in. I think it may have been 16-track actually, but and he was Morgan did some great stuff. He kind of was able to move to a different level, but it was the same kind of DIY approach. We did a lot of bands recorded there. I think China Pig did, and some other bands recorded with him.
A lot of hardcore bands, a lot of hardcore and metal bands.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the scene was. So yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, I think it definitely was our first kind of like, all right, doing it kind of our way, but working with somebody who knew maybe a little bit more and had a little more gear. Some cool stuff that came out of that.
Yeah, because you can if you play them back to back like I was earlier today, it's like you got the first 2 records, they sound good. This one sounds good. Nothing wrong with the way this one sounds. But then when you put on this one, it just for the first time you've got the sound of Monsterland that just jumps out of the speakers. There's a power.
So he was able to tweak. It's the first time we used a little bit of sampling and the vocals to as everybody does the kind of capture the like we'll get that chorus the first time, we'll put it back in the next time, kind of we'll pluck it in later. It was like the whole early days of doing the digital editing and all that stuff. So it was definitely like, whoa, okay, that sounds cool.
See, that's interesting because I remember that the studio he had was all analog. At least he was recording onto tape, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I think there was some editing, sampling technology that was being used that back then. I remember him. It was pretty rudimentary. As a matter of fact, I hear it. I can listen. I can hear how it sounds now, picking it apart. But it was the first time kind of step up, but it's a slightly step up from what we were doing before.
I'd actually say a pretty big one because sonically, I mean, like everything about it, the stereo separation, the sound of the bass, the guitars got bite, the snare cracks. Like all of a sudden, everything's got this clarity and definition to it that was kind of missing on the first 2 records and on the demo. It just really sounds good. And that goes for the American pressing too as well, because I think maybe part of the problem with the first 2 American singles was with the mastering, to my ears. But now you've got 2 records that are recorded beautifully, mastered well, and pressed well, and the band is really starting to sound really good on vinyl.
Yeah. I want to, jump back because it made me think of there's one other recording we had in '91 that came out that it might have been recorded late '90. It was Twice at the End, and it came out on the My Companion compilation,
you
Turn of
guys,
the Century Records out of Hartford.
You hated that record, if I remember.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty terrible recording, but it was one of those like we went to studio and just okay, you guys can record here, blah blah blah. It was one of our first times in an actual studio, and it just didn't come out right. But we also never really quite were happy with that song until I guess much later we did probably your 4th version. But I actually had St. Johnny on and Alice Donuts, that comp, the Crabs out of New Haven, Camera Face, Gravel Pit. It was through a Turn of the Century Records. That was '91.
Yeah, Turn of the Century was they were a Hartford-based label, I believe.
Yeah, and Mike Deming was involved, who we ended up recording with later, who had Studio 45. He was involved with that, and that's how the first time we met Mike. But yeah, I remember going. But yeah, we were not happy with that record at all. So don't seek it out. But there's some vinyl copies out there. if you really want to look for it. Again, look at our Discogs page, which is, I think, between Malcolm and I, it's pretty complete. So
Yeah, I know I've got a copy of that record. We sold that one at the store back in the day. I remember getting a box of 10 or 15 of them, and as is so often the case, had a few leftover copies. They went straight into storage, and the storage went straight into my basement. So I'll have
yeah,
to root
exactly.
around and look for those. But I won't try to sell them to anybody because
Yeah, it's
that
fine. But
song.
I had to mention, just in the sense that we're talking linear and going to in the next step. So
Yeah, it's all about the completism. It's why we do it.
yeah,
And as mentioned earlier, you're on a almost steady upward trajectory here in terms of getting the stuff out, the quality of the stuff out, the quality of the recording. And if I have my chronology correct, the next release was primarily a release on CD, but you guys were always real sticklers for vinyl, which is why there is actually a 10-inch version of the Loser Friendly EP on the Spin Art label.
yeah. So we moved. This is when, again, we've started. With Matt Kaplan's help, we got a line. Spin Art was quite a burgeoning label that was originally from, I think, rooted in New York, but Pennsylvania. But bands like the Lilies were involved with that and that kind of scene. So there was a lot of interesting, indie pop, shoegazy kind of jangly stuff going on. So we were lucky enough to hook up with them, who put the 7-inch out. And again, the 7-inch did really well. It had a lot of coverage in the UK, like the Peanut Butter Karma, the UK version. It got a lot of UK press and Enemy and Sounds and stuff like that. So we tried to get some buzz, and then so Spin Art did his EP, which is our first foray out of the single thing, and this is where we recorded with Kurt Ralsky from Ultra Vivid Scene Phase, who Tom and I were massive fans of. I had met Kurt a couple years earlier via XCI, as we said, get to meet a lot of artists. So yeah, we went down to New York and recorded this in Kurt's studio, and we did have a vinyl pressing, which is quite fun, a 10-inch. But yeah, we skipped a big step though. At this point, we have a new drummer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's kind of a slight point we would want to mention. We
Yeah,
talked
and then
about
we got to step back into before the Peanut Butter Karma recording is one of our first recordings with Todd Cronin, who enters the scene. So, let's talk about the scene. So, Chris Mitchell leaves, right? Todd Cronin comes in, new drummer. Chris Mitchell loved him. There was no real ill will, but Chris decided he was playing at the time in '91. He was playing with Head as well as playing with Monsterland. There was a period of time when he was sort of playing both, and it was getting a bit of a problem because obviously we were both playing a lot, and I think we decided you got to give him a choice of what did he want to do, and so he decided he wanted to stick with Head, which was a good call for him because he was he excelled at that for a long time, and found this guy Todd Cronin, which is Tom's girlfriend at the time, Susan Moore, knew from New York, but across the border in New York. Todd Cronin was, and he came and played a show and played a rehearsal, and it was like, okay, you're in. It was pretty easy. He was another stellar drummer. You couldn't ask for it was pretty easy to find a new drummer. We weren't really looking very long.
which is an incredible rarity. If anybody's ever been in a band, knows that finding the right drummer is a biatch.
Yeah. Here's a picture. Here's Todd in the back here.
Yeah, there he is. That's the boy.
And so yeah, we were skipping ahead there, but anyway, yeah. So things kind of changed a bit. Todd definitely has a different style too. He's a little more, on the beat kind of guy. Not quite the Keith Moon that Chris Mitchell is kind of thing, but both powerhouse drummers. So Todd really tightened us up in a sense of really giving us a structure of I think that's what the difference was. Okay, and matter of fact, when we got back together a couple years ago and we were playing, and Tom and I had played a few times in LA at his home and trying to remember the songs and how to play a guitar and how to plug it in and stuff like that. And then we finally got Todd in. When Todd played, it was like it all kind of came together. Like it was like, oh, okay, this is easy because the rhythm is a big part of what we did, right? So anyway, yeah. So Todd Cronin is now involved, and their first recordings were at Morgan Walker Studio, and then we went down to the next move is we got to go record a Kowalski, which is great. Which I think none of us were really happy with that EP. The results wasn't quite the punch we would like, but it was a great experience working with it. Magazine is one of my favorite songs, and I really enjoyed playing that. Matter of fact, it was great to play that when we got back together. I think it's one of those. It's really one of our best. I think an oddball, but it's also a bit lost because no one really heard it in a long time. So
That's a good one. I'm gonna take one step back again in doing the sort of drummer comparison. When we spoke last time on the last episode, I kind of made the observation that when it came to the difference between Head and Monsterland, Head were more visceral and Monsterland were maybe more cerebral. So to me, it made a lot of sense for Chris Mitchell to go over to Head because that was pure visceral, and that was definitely more his style. And Todd's style of drumming was more cerebral. It's like more actual parts put together and played. And so I really, in my opinion, love Chris Mitchell, but I think he was definitely better off in Head.
Exactly, because we were moving to that direction, like a little more of a pop kind of vibe, and I'll get to it, but recently been revisiting the Head stuff, which will soon be fully reissued, to put it that way. We're working on that right now, but basically, like, there's so much crazy shit going on Head at that point, like in 91, 92. It's like they're just exploding into this, like, it's like Flaming Lips, Butthole Surfers kind of thing, just that no one knows it outside of Connecticut, unfortunately, But yeah, no, you're totally right. So like Todd gave us a little different path to kind of like, okay, we can rely on this. He knew exactly what we were trying to do. We had a lot of similar music taste. So it kind of moved ahead. And I was just sort of like looking at the inserts for the Peanut Butter Karma single, and it's reminding me what was going on at the time. So in 91 was really interesting. There was I said a lot. We were doing shows locally. We were connecting with bands like Vanilla Trainwreck from North Carolina, the Lilies, who had put out their first, who were like legend band now, but we connected with them really early with their first single, and they had played shows in Danbury. We had China Pig Busy, Bad Dream House happening. We even did some recordings with Sean Sheridan, not the Anthrax Sean Sheridan, and he had done some recordings. I recently discovered some 6-track recordings, which are pretty awesome, of versions of songs that never happened. I think because we were pretty active in trying to figure out our studios at that point. And then we started to do stuff at TK's, right? TK's was like a part of it was like the sports bar, and TK, which is still around, the bar. But he let us, after the football games on Sunday, a bunch of punk rockers would come in and we'd get to play every Sundays, which is something I booked every Sunday, mainly because Monsterland needed a gig, and TK would let me drink there, usually really late at night with my buddy Brian Kelly. It was all his idea, really. But yeah, it was a really interesting time. It was like definitely a scene, and things are happening. We had Rockville in New York. We had Matt Kaplan. We were friends of bands in North Carolina, and Lilies were DC, Baltimore. There was a lot of stuff happening, and we were even, there was a time we were even talking to, because we had connections to like the Mammoth Records out of North Carolina and like the Merge scene. So, there was really interesting things happening. Craig, we had the Monda Psychotic label, Craig's label, Mud Industries. Also great bands like locally, like Transylvanian Death Express, who were bouncing around from Hartford. It's just like, to me, like there that time, like 90, 91, for about a year into 19, it was definitely like, that's why it's a blur. I don't remember. There was so much stuff going on and so many shows.
And that was another interesting phenomenon. Like around then, maybe a little bit later, is when people started moving to Danbury so they could be part of that whole scene, like bands like Creature Did, for example. They came all the way down from Litchfield County.
It was like Creature Did was, there was definitely all these like peripheral things happening. And it was interesting because there was a whole other side. There was like the Western Connecticut, the Eastern Connecticut scene, which had no connection at all. I mean, St. Johnny might have been the blur, but there was like a whole nother scene of stuff that was happening, like the Yukon scene. So for a small state, I thought it was interesting. And New Haven became kind of our central point where like we all kind of converged, and that's where like, the famous Nirvana show happened, and all that stuff, we're at the moon and all that stuff, which was definitely another thing. And that was probably the most energy that was looking at that footage back then, like Nirvana playing and, Smashing Pumpkins and all these bands that were coming through. So Connecticut was had a lot of stuff going on. We all were able to kind of tap into it. Dinosaur Jr. would play all the time. It was definitely very fascinating. So it was like, I think we're all just feeding off that stuff and ready to tackle the world. By the way, here's one of the inserts from the Peanut Butter Karma.
Oh, there you go. Nice. I don't even recognize that. That's kind of embarrassing.
It's from the spin art one. But yeah, so what it says, it was definitely looking back, and interesting enough, I was just looking a note here. We thanked Anthony Price on the Peanut Butter Karma. Anthony Price was in a band called Venus Beads.
Oh yeah,
who were Anthony was kind of camped in Danbury for a little bit, and we ended up playing a lot with him. He ended up jamming with us for a while, and while he was in Connecticut. And I know there's some tapes that are like exist of us jamming with him and playing, kind of writing songs. And I think we were at the point where like kind of asking him to play in the band for a minute. But of course he was in a band called Venus Beans and was living somewhere else. But we did actually play with him when we toured the UK. We played a show in Manchester. We played a cover of Squirrelbait's Sun God.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, so there was some digress. So we were talking about the next, then the spin art. So we did 2 records of spin art. The EP comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't really get much press, to be honest with you. It wasn't really well received. And so it wasn't probably our if you listen to linearly, it's probably not the most obvious sound move, right? It's different.
Well, but why do you think that is? I mean, did spin art just not have the market presence or the?
No, it was. I think the record. I mean, I think the sound was definitely not quite there. It's a little bit. It's not quite as heavier sounding that we were kind of playing live. But no, I just don't know. I don't think it was there. At that point, we're also looking forward to other things. So, I think we were just playing and trying to get interest in other labels and stuff like that at that point.
So that raises an interesting point too. If you're doing the spin art thing, and this is '92, had Seed started coming around yet, or any of the other majors?
Yeah, so this is the point where I think we're starting. Matthew is doing his job as a lawyer, and kind of hustling, inviting people to shows. We start playing New York. We start playing Manhattan a lot more. So more and more. Labels are coming to see us. I'm looking at our list of live shows. So 90, we start playing end of 91. We do, actually there's a famous show with Head and Monsterland at the Spiral in November 91.
Oh, was that one of the party bus gigs?
Yes, exactly. Which most of us don't remember for a lot of reasons. And then there's we played NYU again, and that was thanks to Chloe. Originally, he was Chris Mitchell's girlfriend at the time. Chloe
Sweeney. Hats off to Chloe.
So we played December 6th at the Loeb Center with Alice Donut, Luna Chicks, Ween, and Berserk, which is a pretty amazing show. Ween being way down on the bill. I think they played right after us actually.
Wow.
And then we played again really quickly. We started playing. We're doing shows at Space Chase, and then we're doing shows in early '92 in Raleigh, and hitting down into playing in. I think we played down in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and those kind of scenes related to Lilies and stuff like that. So we're kind of getting out there at that point.
Right on. And that goes into something you mentioned earlier about Craig Colarusso and his label Mud Industries, you guys did one parting shot for Danbury, and that was the split 7-inch. We got it right here, the Monsterland China Pig Split.
Yep.
Which
and
came out.
Is our track Blank, which was recorded at Studio 45, Mike Deming's studio, which at the time was, I think that was 1-inch 16-track tape, which I think sounds fantastic because it's just like really thick, and it's definitely probably my all-time favorite Monsterland song. Is like it just, I was able to kind of let loose some of my guitar and a little bit of overdubs and stuff. It's a bit of like Mudhoney meets Sonic Youth or something like that. I always say like it's sort of the moment. It's like it's got a little moments of like Soundgarden or something like that too. It's like it's interesting. It's a pretty heavy sound, and
That's
the China Pig
one.
track, the China Pig track's pretty great. So yeah, we did a local 7-inch of Craig. It's which actually ended up being on the, I believe Blank was also on the our last EP we put out as well through Atlantic Seed Records.
Right on. And I don't remember I don't really remember like any announcements or anything, but I think it was kind of known at this point when you guys did this record. This was the sort of sayonara to being strictly local. It was kind of understood that you guys were gonna go somewhere after this.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it wasn't like, I didn't think we ever thought of it as a big, I mean, it was obviously a big deal, but we were, Spin Art was courting us pretty heavy, but they had a deal with Sony at the time, and we were talking to them, but also we were talking to Seed, which was a sub, one of what they call fake indie from Atlantic, run by a guy who still runs Atlantic Records, Craig Coleman, and, he had Big Beat Records. So Seed ended up being, they offered us a decent deal, and it wasn't like we were making, it wasn't even like a 6-figure deal. It was just like, kind of a friendly, cool indie deal, enough to buy us an amp and pay off, I think the van that Tom bought, whatever. We tried to keep it real, but it was like we kind of had faith in them. They would do stuff, and yeah, it was kind of a big move, but I don't think we had any issues with the I guess if like there was other labels like Sub Pop or something came approach, we would be interested, but it was just like a cool label that wanted to do stuff with us, so we were pretty happy at the time.
Right on. And that from my experience and talking to a lot of people who signed with either majors or, as you said, fake indies, beautiful way of putting it. A lot of times, I mean, you got to walk a really thin line in order to keep your integrity, your finances, basically to keep yourself from being completely shafted by the label. And you guys are maybe the only band I can think of who managed to do that.
Well, but also you mentioned before, like Dutch East, big indie, didn't pay anybody, right? So I think the reality is like, I mean, we know now, like none of the labels really pay anybody, right? No matter if you're major. So, but we didn't even really, the problem is like with Seed, which we didn't really last long enough to really, because we ended up breaking up before we really got to see the results. Our album came out and we ended up breaking up within 4 months of the album coming out, right? So we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but basically, yeah, I'm listening. Like that was my take too. Is like I always say, like, I mean, yeah, we could have kept our, the indie Discord kind of thing, but honestly, all my favorite records are on major label. Sire Records, major label, right? Warner Music, major label. So it didn't matter to me. I mean, I knew. Luckily, you had like Steve Albini and people talking about things at the time. Option Magazine was a good magazine that was like, I remember reading a lot of like these pieces that I think Albini wrote and stuff about, stay away from the majors. So we were very aware of like the pitfalls, right? But there's a trade-off. I still think it holds true today. Like you just got to know what you're in for. It could work for you. It could work against you.
Yeah.
We still have some issues with that whole situation, but you know what? They pay, they paid stuff, but at the same time, we never got any money from Rockville either. But
Yeah.
It's the same. I don't even know if we got any money from TPOS. But whatever.
Hey, cut me to the quick. You know,
But that's the thing we all think. But we're at that point where like everyone's at the point where like it didn't really matter. You know, it's like, put a record out, right? You're going to put a record out. You know, you're assuming we're not going to make any money, right? I think that's we all make that mistake as musicians, right? We just like, you just put it out, and if it's a success, then it becomes a problem, right? If it just does what it does, it's not really a big deal because everybody go, I got some copies to sell and blah blah blah. It's fine. But then the problem is like when nobody, you know, and I deal with this every day too. And even as a guy who runs a label myself, it's like there's always that problem of like, shit, you know, you got to make sure you pay guys, but there's really not much money to pay anyway, you know. It's just, you know. So yeah, at the time was definitely, I guess, the concern of like going to that move, but everyone was kind of doing it. I think we did it maybe a little too early where we could have really cashed in on it. You know, honestly, it's like if it would have been 6 months, a year later when things were really blowing up, you know, with like bands, I mean, we probably could have gotten big money and just went for it. But we were kind of playing it cool, like, yeah, we want to be indie and not really do a big deal, but we want to find the right label and don't want to be in debt. But reality is like you're better off just taking that money because they're just going to give you like, you know, you hear stories about bands that got millions of dollars and really net records never came out. They don't have to pay that back, you know. It's like it's just like, all right, write it off, you know, tax deduction next, you know, Atlantic, Sony, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So listen, that's a whole different conversation. But so yeah, we had an opportunity, you know, I bought an amp, paid for the van, you know.
You guys got an 8-track recorder too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so we bought, that was a big investment. It was sort of like so we can record our stuff, and obviously Tom was moving to wanting to be more of the, you know, producer thing, and he recorded a lot of bands locally, and it was great. You know, the demos of the album were pretty awesome sounding, which, you know, we hope to unleash one day. They're pretty, you know, they're a little faster and a little rawer, but you know, from the album version we did of the Destroy What You Love album. So yeah, we had some good stuff. So we kind of working with Deming a bit. The Blank kind of got us ready to kind of start doing some recording. So let's back up a bit. So we actually we signed this record label deal, and the label wants a producer. So we really wanted to work with Eli Janney because he did the Lilies record February 14th. And Eli was actually, I didn't think we knew at the time, but he was in a band called Girls Against Boys.
Oh, those guys. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they weren't really a big deal at the moment, but, you know, they were, but the label wanted us a producer. So Eli had been working a lot with a guy named Ted Nicely. And Ted Nicely we liked because he was in Tommy Keen's band as the bass player. We were big fans of Tommy Keen. But Eli and Ted have been working on a lot of the, you know, Jawbox and, you know, Shudder to Think and all those, you know, DC kind of bands doing a lot of great stuff. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for us. So we went down to Oz Studios down in Baltimore, which it was called at the time, which is now Jay Robbins' studio. He has. But anyway, so that was you know, crazy because now we're like gonna do an album, you know, for like, I don't know, it was a week or something like that, like a week, I guess it was.
That's a lot of time, man. That's a lot of time. Yeah. An entire week.
Yeah. So that was it was cool because we had like, you know, big studio, all kinds of amps and, you know, fun stuff to do. And, you know, it was a great experience, you know, it was fun, you know, got to make a lot of noise and, you know, it was definitely that kind of like moment of like, holy shit, you know, we're actually making a big, you know, record, you know. We just started touring a bit more around like down south a bit more around that time as well.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of, I guess it sort of helps to address the issue of what could a major offer you that an indie couldn't. And that would be bigger facilities.
Yeah, I mean, basically this funding. So and they were able to hire, you know, it's to hire the publicist and, you know, the radio pluggers and stuff, a little more, and just more organized, basically. You could put it that way, you know. So, I mean, the difference between, I'll tell you the anecdote we say why we didn't sign was Spin Art, who had a big deal with Sony or Columbia at the time, which was, and bands like Lotion and, you know, ended up doing deals with it. and we went with Seed. And I remember meeting both labels, and I remember Todd. We were trying to make a decision, and Todd was like, well, every time we go to Sony, they bring us up like down to like 4 or 5 floors, and I can never remember where the bathroom is. And then Atlantic is just like Seed. I know where the office is. It's just a small office. So we just said, okay, we're assigning to Seed Records, right? Because it was like, we had Mark Lipsitz working there, and guys we kind of knew came from indie background. So, but it was a dumb reason. But yeah, and the real reality is like the big guys just offer the more resources. That's all it comes down to. Whether they do a better job, who knows? But they definitely at the moment, it was definitely the way to go. I don't say we regretted it all. I mean, there's definitely things that were troubling, I guess, like any situation. So, it's it was we got a photo shoot, and it was like stuff that like record labels don't even do that stuff anymore, really. So,
yeah, right.
But getting that, it put us on a radar to get a booking agent, and so we got a booking agent. We can go on a tour, and we were doing it ourselves at that point. Just making phone calls and writing letters back, and that's how you communicate. And then all of a sudden it became we have a little more of a team, and so it moved pretty quickly, because by the time we recorded in, I think it was the spring of '93, and the record came out in November in '93. We were touring in November, December around the U.S., and then we get to an EP we put out. It was really kind of like an expanded single of One More Time, and I guess what was it, March of '94. But we pretty much like we're at this is the point where we're splitting up at this point. So it moved pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's before we get into those gory details, let's take a look at the actual Seed catalog. Hey, that was a pretty good pun, wasn't it? The first thing being the Insulation 7-inch, kind of a teaser for the album.
Yep.
And when I popped this on, I mentioned before about how the sound from one record was like a remarkable improvement over the sound from another one. When I put this one on, after playing the earlier records, this was the one where it really went, boom. Ted Nicely earned his producer's fee on that one. That record
it's like
good.
Again, comparing, the difference of like the approach too, like going from working with Kurt Roski, which again was fine, but was a totally different approach, right? Like Kurt's like more psychedelic kind of approach, and but then we kind of realized, I think at that time we were trying to figure out where we wanted to go. Like I think we liked the heavier sound. We were listening to bands like Belter Space at this point, like heavy stuff and shoegaze, but we were kind of trying to figure out that sweet spot of like, we didn't want to be like, we weren't, much to be like Nirvana, we also wanted to be like these British bands. And so we were trying to figure out a thing. And I think it worked, to be able to get that heaviness between Eli and Ted. They understood it, how to get it. I think we argued a lot about, because like, we always wanted our vocals buried a bit more than, than they would have liked, or, the label would have liked. But, it's like, it was definitely, I think we kind of got to that point. Okay, this is how we want to sound. It's like heavy as fuck, but also sweet too, like it was always like that goal, trying to figure out that sweet and, and nasty sound,
I'd say it worked. I think it really, for the first time, is fully realized on this one little record right here, which, as we mentioned before, is a taster. And look at that, an actual vinyl copy I'm using as a display piece of the Destroy What You Love LP. Looks like you got one there yourself.
I got one too, yeah. Hold on,
all right, yeah, you can provide the visuals.
I can probably go out.
I have a CD of it, but that's not nearly as dramatic.
I move. There we go.
Look at that. He's looking through stacks of records. Tell me that's not great.
Yeah, there we go. Look at that. Look at those pretty boys.
Yeah, there it is. Look at that. They look better. They look better like that than they do like this. They look really tiny here, but they look.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, that's life size, baby. Woo! Aw, what happened?
So yeah, we get John Falls to do these photos. He was doing all the bands that back then. Got this. This unfortunately was replicated poorly inside. I think it was one of those like a little bit cheap job on the pressing, but whatever. It was made on vinyl, and
Only in the UK. I think we should mention that too. That it didn't come out in the States on
it
vinyl.
didn't come out. I believe it didn't. That's why you can only really find these in the UK, and they're kind of expensive to get here. But yeah, in 1993, 93, CD was a thing. Vinyl was not really was kind of waning at this point.
No, the majors were at war. Like, them speaking from direct experience on the retail front, the majors were actively trying to stamp out vinyl. So again, not a pun meant, but
well, just basically the cost. I mean, they just realized the cost. It cost like at that time was like $2 to make a really nice CD, and you can sell them for $15. And vinyl was still costing money, and you just weren't selling as much. But I think I wasn't. I have all these records behind me, but 1993, I wasn't really crazy with collecting, vinyl at that point. But it was all about the CD, right? So, but yeah, so we got to put out this album, which is, and speaking of, even has a Belter Space cover on it, which we did Fisheye, which was going to be a B-side, but we liked it enough to put on the album. Probably the first time they were covered on, and on although funny that they were kind of connected to Atlantic Records with Matador at the time too, because they were.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, it was I think it's a quite nice record.
Yeah, it is. It carries on. I mean, once again, you got that production, the songwriting is all there, and again, you guys were walking a fine line. I remember a number of stories about dealing with the major label. One I remember was about the cover. Now, if I recall correctly, that was your choice for the cover.
Yeah, I remember we made Rob Drive helped make that record for cover for us. Yes.
Okay, but there was definitely some compromise, and I always think about this when I think about the major label, kind of like assembly line, way of producing records. And you pointed out earlier the back cover. You got the Monsterland back cover.
Yeah.
And I think about this record by this other group I like called Blinker the Star.
Same look.
Look at their back cover.
Well, and even the video from Installation, which was filmed in Brookfield and Danbury and stuff, and we had that video, which is quite fun, and it was a lot of people came and jumped around in the basement of the place where we rehearsed at, and we filmed around Danbury. But like a lot of that video was used for Better Than Ezra is the next video that came out in Atlantic. The same director did it. So if you look at the Better Than Ezra video, there's like so many scenes are like the same. But that's how video directors did. Like they always borrowed ideas. The reality was our video wasn't well seen, but you can watch the Better Than Ezra video. You're like, well, that looks like the Monsterland video because it's got the same elements. But absolutely, yes, there's like a lot of that stuff. So I don't really remember the arguments on the artwork, but I know there was definitely some compromise, and
well, kind of the same deal with the video too. That was one where I remember where you guys did stand your ground, because Tom showed me the original treatment for the video that the record company wanted you to do, and it was stupid. It was like close up of a mannequin head underwater and bubbles are coming out of her mouth, and then it shoots to the band playing in a big empty warehouse with mannequin parts hanging down.
Yeah, it was so 90s. I mean, I kind of vaguely remember that. I mean, we were pretty happy the way the video came out, I think. Because we had a lot of input into it and, kind of do some stuff. But yeah, it was, I mean, that's just how it works. I mean, they're going to try to, luckily we didn't have, I think in some ways it was sort of like, they didn't have like major hopes on a single or something that made us do something. Like if there was a big single, they probably totally would have made us do something else. So we didn't have a lot of the, like, oh fuck, they're going to make us do everything. We definitely had a lot of input. And like anything else, you have to compromise. So I think even the end, like there's, the mastering of the record, Tom was never happy with it, nor I, because it was done done at like midnight, like after somebody else's session for like, we have like one shot to do it, right? That's it, done, right? So like, would like to have it, we know we could probably make it sound, even meaner, right? So, it's, but even working with, the end working with Ted Nicely, the Compromise, he was great. He definitely kind of reeled us in a bit, but there's a few things that I think that probably we should have maybe not reeled in so much, but that's with every record. I'm sure every band's got a regret in every song,
No, no doubt, no doubt. And it just gets back to, I think, even like you said, it's a fake indie. So you're still plugged into this giant machinery that does things a certain way, and they expect you to do things that way. And again, I think I'm going to guess that one of the saving graces is that you had your own infrastructure. You had Kaplan working for you. You actually had somebody looking out for your own interests and protecting you in that regard.
Yeah, we knew, we kind of, and then we, again, I was always trying to keep on top of the word in the street, what to watch out for. There was a lot of that kind of looking at what kind of do deals, and it was kind of pre-internet, so it was you didn't Google what was a good contract or bad contract, but there was definitely a lot of chatter and what to watch out for. So Albini was very vocal at that time. So we kind of knew we were in for it, but I must say it wasn't a horrible experience. And I think, we started to get the support when we needed it. And it just, who knows what happened if we didn't call it quits,
Yeah. And that kind of begs the question, man, what happened? You guys are there.
Well, it's, it's like any story. It's you kind of, you get a couple guys, now we're sitting in the van a lot more, we're touring a bit, and started to get, November of 93, we're actually out there touring in snowstorms and hitting Florida and, Texas and California and stuff, and playing in front of nobody in some places and a lot of people in other places. Got to open for, Teenage Fan Club, Boo Radley's, Tango, a lot of great bands, even Big Country we played a show with, and then a bunch of other bands in between. But, it's like anything else, all of a sudden things start changing, a lot of different, anxieties and pressures start happening. So we started getting each other's face a little bit, particularly Tom and I. And, that's just the basic story of it. And by the time, so we put this EP out, the One More Time EP comes out, I guess it's March 94, which is really like a single that we kind of turned into an EP because we had all these other songs. We had that song, I'm blanking now, what we put on there. That's on, you have the EP in front of you somewhere, Malcolm?
It's the only thing I don't have, oddly enough, but I do remember there were some tracks from previous releases on there.
We put Girlfriend on Drugs, which is from the great Danbury compilation, which we didn't talk about, but the Chop Wait.
Oh, Chop With Great,
Great Liquefy, which is that's one of the statements of the scene in some ways, with all Head and Bunny Brains and, Freak Baby, Bad Dream House, you name it.
Everybody,
but so Girlfriend on Drugs, which is one of our favorite live songs, that was they played that is a remixed version on that. Blank is on that EP. We also put Chewbacca, which is an outtake from the album, which is pretty big and hairy, which is why it's called Chewbacca. That's the reason it's called that. A song called Jane Reedland Used to Be a Go-Go, as far as we know, which was recorded at Mike Deming's, and then I'm blanking on this. I think another song on it, but so at One More Time, and Your Touch Is Uncomfortable to Me, which is very appropriate for 2020.
Yeah, right.
So there's there's kind of a little flavor of new stuff we're doing there, like those songs, the Jane Reedland song and the Your Touch, a little sparser, different, we're kind of moving new areas. But so the EP comes out, and it's it's a little bit of a compromise of being a single, which One More Time was viewed as a single, but we decided we have all this other stuff we're working on, and so it's a cool EP, but it gives a flavor of what maybe would have been next, and so we're definitely playing a lot more shows. But I think the reality of us trying to be, us coming up, growing up as adults and being in a van and band and trying to figure out what we want to do. Do you want to be the singer in a band? Do you want to do, it just becomes that thing. So, the big breakup show was wasn't really the breakup show, but the big famous show was the Brownies fight we had down, which was like the first of a tour we were doing for this Pop Narcotic compilation that we were going to be on. So Pop Narcotic was a label out of Boston, and it was like a comp that had Polvo and Dam Builders and Versus and all these, great bands. And it was the first of, I think, 3 shows. We were supposed to do Boston, Rhode Island, maybe 4 shows. We just got back from our tour in Southeast, I believe it was. But we were kind of at each other's throat, and we had this show. And then I think I'm going to blame it on a lot on the newfounded cider drinks we were finding at the time, but also meeting with the record label, and things didn't go quite well, and the show, and Tom and I got in each other's face, and blah blah blah, and it was just I took a swing, and blah blah blah, and it just, the rest is history. Although we did muster up the energy to play one last show in Danbury at the Flying Squire, I guess it was the time what that maybe was called, was I was listening to the recording. There's a couple great songs that we didn't release that we played that show, which is pretty ferocious sounding show. And then we went to Europe and toured Europe we toured with Cell, CELL, who were also on the verge of breaking up, it turned out, when we were on tour with them. But it was great. It was a good tour. I mean, we got a lot of good response over there, but it was definitely not a good time for us. We weren't at a fertile, enthusiastic youth at the time. So, and then basically was it. We got back home, and we didn't really do anything again. So,
wow.
That was April '94. And that, we were in England at the time when, you've heard Kurt Cobain died and all that stuff. So, it's very memorable, but played some great shows. Met Grant Hart in London. He came backstage to hang out with us, told him we was thanked on a lot of our records,
Which he probably hated.
Yeah. It was really nice and cool, but I was totally surprised, So yeah, we made some friends over there, and so we played in Manchester with Anthony from Venus Beads, and we played 2 songs with us. He played one of our songs, and I don't remember what song it was, and we did a cover of Sun God by Squirrel Bait, which was quite fun.
Right.
So anyway, that's sort of the end of it, I guess. But definitely there was, as I mentioned, the Pop Narcotic compilation came out, and I had, there's some tracks on that, and there was also this radio show that was like Dave's Garage 7-inch. It was a split with Archers of Loaf that came out posthumously, which was kind of an error. Must admit, it was kind of something that I think we said yes to, but not sure it was really going to happen. And then all of a sudden it came out, and the label was pretty annoyed by it. But it's actually not great anyway. So probably, it's not the greatest way to end recording process, like a radio session, but. So anyway, yeah, it's just one of those things, the whirlwind, so we played, I guess it was really almost 5 years we lasted, right? So it was 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Probably not a bad run, and probably longer than most bands. I must say the last show we ever played was opening for Bad Brains at the Bataclan in Paris.
That's not bad at all.
I don't remember Bad Brains being very good at that point, but
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story. If you caught them on a good night, great. If you didn't,
yeah, this is 94. This is 94, so.
Yeah, that was their major label dalliance, and that record was terrible. So, probably enough said.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, but it was a lot of, and then, yeah. So at that point we were doing, there was a lot of stuff going on in the scene too. Like, I was doing TKs pretty regularly. We would play there for our record release shows, and we'd have whoever, even Brainiac played an amazing show there. Archers of Loaf, you name it, all these great bands had played through town. So at that point, Danbury was definitely on the radar. And there was a point, I'm getting back to your comment before, there was a moment when Mr. Thurston Moore mentions Danbury's the next Seattle, which was probably why everything kind of fell apart in some ways. But
yeah, a little too much attention, maybe.
Yeah, but there's definitely that kind of moment. People were looking for what was going on, And I think, we were the ones that kind of got out there enough to kind of, represent, I guess,
Yeah. Well, there was another mention somewhere in some other magazine about Oh, more of those Danbury bands. There's actually that much of an awareness of it that they could refer to those
There was
Danbury
too
bands.
much of us that people were sick of us.
Yeah.
But there was, it's interesting because I said, like, there was like, I think, New York at the time, especially early 90s, late 80s, like, it was like Sonic Youth. You had like the White Zombies and the Sonic Youth, Live School, and then you had hardcore, like, the Cro-Mags or whatever the hell going on. And, then you had some other bands kind of popping out from there. Like, I think there was like bands like Sleepyhead that were based out of there at the time. There's like these indie bands are kind of popping out like around 92 or so. But, I mean, yeah, but you had more of a thing going on in Connecticut or Boston, right? Maybe. And then you had like, even Lancaster or, those kind of places had little pockets and stuff. So people are always looking for that like next thing. I'm not some believer with the scene. I'm always a believer. I kind of always hated the people moved to Seattle. It was like the idea like people went to all move to Seattle. Like if so many bands came back, there's like if they came back, they were junkies or they were, it was like, and to me, it's like create your own scene, do your own thing, right? Sometimes it's not possible because you're so remote, right? But if you're, I think back to we were talking before, like there was a catalyst of things that happened in between your store and the radio station, and then all these little things that happened that just kind of made it really fertile and gave us exposure to music. We spit it back out and be able to kind of figure it out, try to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I think of, at the end of the day, it did what it had to do. And, when you consider how the bottom fell out of everything musically by about mid to late 95, it's probably inevitable that things ended the way they did because the infrastructure just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it just shifted. Things shifted different areas. So, I, it was a natural thing. I think with the whole what was going on, I always said like we're going to create those like Nuggets Pebbles compilations. And we always joke like we're going to be in like the Pebbles, the northwestern Connecticut scene, Volume 5. It'll be like bands that no one's ever even heard of that'll be on comps. Like it's actually kind of needed, really. It's like really need to have that.
I agree. I mean, there should be a '90s revival because there was tons of great music that came out of that whole scene. I mean, tons of it, and it seems
Well,
like
yeah.
nobody cares.
The 7-inch thing is actually the interesting thing. Is like there's all these little labels that started, and a lot of them are just people making their own records, right? It's the and I find it really fascinating. But there's like this stuff you find, and you're like, oh yeah, they put that one single and they broke up, right? Actually, there's a new comp that's coming out of Third Man Records about the Detroit early '90s shoegaze scene. That includes a couple bands like Number One Fan, I think it is, and then like Catherine, these bands. But it's like a kind of obscure compilation, but it's like it's cool. I mean, I don't even know half the bands, but there's been a few of those out there, and I think and you realize, oh yeah, there was a moment of like this like really independent do-it-yourself thing. People put records out, whether it's record stores or bands, and there's definitely great bands. There's tons of 7-inches from the scene that I said like Transylvanian Death Express had this like that one great 7-inch. It's just like unworldly. And there's all these great little things that people should hear. So I think that in the digital world we're in now, like there's no reason why we can't. I think they should exist somehow. At least for streaming purposes. I'm actually working with Ernie with Head right now about getting up all the head stuff up. Right, it'll probably be out before the end of the year. So
That's very exciting because he's already posted the Her Fix Today album,
yeah,
which and that's a whole other story entirely. I don't think that the Head catalog was ever at the time properly mixed, mastered, pressed, or anything. So to finally hear those tunes like with that bam kind of
yeah.
sound, whew.
There's even a really amazing Pete's House of Sound recording that's like really unbelievable that
Yeah.
Pete posted a while. But but like GNU Fuzz, for example, too. Like GNU Fuzz stuff is like it's really unique, a little different because they were actually a little ahead of us. They started a little before Monsterland and Head actually, but they. I was going back listening to that stuff, kind of like that. What they call it, folk junk or whatever they called it, and it was Tom Waits kind of inspired the folk stuff, it kind of bridged the gap of interesting things. But there's so many things that are going on. But I think there's uniqueness of all the bands from the Newtown Danbury scene. You know, it was like there's also stuff was going on in Portchester too that was kind of like I think fueled it all too. Like it's just everybody was just far enough away, you know, between like SUNY Purchase and all that stuff that kept us on the edge. You know, we had access to New York City close enough that we could see cool stuff, and it's like I think that's the interesting thing is like the amount of crazy shows we saw, you know, and the bands that we were able to see, you know, and then support some of them too.
Yeah, definitely. And then we're still far away from New York City. You know, I mean, geographically, Danbury is what, 86 miles, but it might as well be a whole other planet. So you could take those influences, bring them back, and you're in a completely different place and almost like a completely different time. And so it has to come out unique and interesting and different. There's no other way.
Well, I think that's the thing that's interesting at the time is like the idea of a scene and the sound of a scene. Like there was actually, you know, you could tell like, oh, the stuff recorded in Boston at the time. Well, that sounds like Boston. And then there's like, you know, the Martin B.C. Wharton Tears recordings of New York. And, you know, then you go down to North Carolina and you have, you know, the sounds from the guy, Jerry Key, whatever his name is, the studio down there. And, you know, the Polo recorded their stuff. And, you know, everyone, you know, has a little studios they go to, it has a sound. And it's funny because like now, you know, because it was like kind of that's how you just heard it. You only heard it locally. You didn't hear stuff from other little scenes. But now everything digital is like global, and you can just like, oh, I just, you know, the band from New Zealand, Miles B from LA. You know, it's like they all sound like the same thing. You know, kind of missed that. You know, the sounds. You know, and even like think about New Zealand, like that whole Flying Nun sound. It was really an isolated sound of why it stuck out because it was like they were either way ahead or way behind something at the time, right?
Yeah,
like
totally.
they weren't sounding like anybody else, and even for Australia, they weren't sounding. So, yeah, it's kind of fascinating, but it all comes back to listening to music, right? So it's just about people. That's how none of the bands ever. There's never a band that's like, oh, I don't listen to music. Like no one ever says that, right? You know, like. Maybe there's an example somewhere, but like no, it's always about like what's going on around them, what they had access to, you know. The Shags is a great story, and the Shags, you know, their access to sound and what they knew, they were isolated. That's why they made that weird sound. They didn't really have interaction with other bands, you know. That's at least the story anyway. That's why they kind of sound weird, you know.
Yeah. And totally wonderful, and it couldn't have happened any other time or any other place, really.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, but it was definitely, you know, we got back together in 2017, was it right?
Yeah, for these shows right here.
A 2-date tour of, you know, which is really was long, felt like a week and a half, you know, but yeah, it was great to kind of revisit. And an interesting thing was like trying to learn songs that like we actually probably hadn't played even longer ago. That time was 27 years, I guess, since last time we played. But there are songs we were trying to play we didn't even play in '94. You know, we were trying to learn songs from 3 years before, like songs like Dust we play, which is a song that I don't even think Todd Cronin played drums on at one point. But, you know, we just sort of pick, but when you look at it all, put it all together, like, okay, here's all the great songs. Like, well, we didn't actually play some of these songs by the time we ended. We were doing new stuff, right? And it was definitely kind of interesting to kind of relearn what the hell we were doing and what we're thinking about. But it was fun. It was definitely fun, but it was definitely hard to try to get that energy back though, you know?
Mm. Trying to overcome that feeling of being stuck in the van in Fargo, North Dakota again after all these years. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was like, you know, I mean, we thanks to Al Christofuli, who invited us, who basically been bugging us to play shows. He used DJW FDU, and he'd been asking us to do stuff. But he actually, funny enough, worked at Turn of the Century Records in Hartford.
Yes. Ironically enough.
Yeah, so that's how he knew who we were. So, so he had been asking us for a while. So he was doing a benefit show, and so we finally said, what the hell, why not, right? So we did it. We got with the kind of. I said Tom lives in LA now, so we had to go out to LA to rehearse in his like studio, and then we did a bit in New York. We came in New York, so. But luckily, Mr. Todd Cronin actually still plays his drums, you know, in his house pretty regularly. So it was like, if it wasn't for that, we probably would have been like, this sucks, we're not going to do this. But he pulled it all together for us. So it was definitely a lot of fun.
Right on. I saw both shows, loved them. They were great, I thought. Energy was good. Band sounded awesome. And I just might have to pull out from the archive over there the recordings I made of each night and listen to them and relive the glory of that. That'll be all right. So tell the people one last thing or two last things. What do the people want to know before we sign off from Greg Vegas?
What do they want to know? Well, first of all, vote. That's all I'll say that. I don't know what to say, but but thanks for diving down memory lane. But definitely, go back and listen to all these bands from the scene. I think there's some great stuff, and I'm trying to work. I have this label called Declared Goods that I'm working on. I do bands from all over the world, but I'm working with the head, trying to get their stuff out, and I promise we will get some of this early Monsterland stuff out again and kind of properly, remastered or cleaned up or whatever. But I've been slowly archiving the stuff and finding some interesting gems I didn't even know existed, and it's definitely fun to revisit this stuff. Yeah,
right on. I hope it happens, because if you can do with especially the early Monsterland recordings, what you've done with the head recordings, it's going to be a treat. Yeah. And
we'll see. I mean, it's like trying to. I think there's the things we can actually, with the mastering and digital stuff these days, you can really pull a lot of stuff out and make it sound pretty fat, So we'll see. But it's definitely already. I said, even revisiting the famous Smile tape, I was like, okay, wow, this stuff's great. And there's even some, unknown mixes that I was like, why is this one tape sound better than anything we've done? Like, there's a couple of these songs that were like, either they're like, I'm not sure what we did, but I was like, literally found like mix number 1 that wasn't used, but it sounds much better than whatever we used, So there's a lot of interesting stuff we can dive into, but I realize how prolific we were for those for something years.
Right on. Very cool. Well, thanks I thank you for taking the time to do this. Lot of things, lot of gaps filled in my information bank right now, and that's really cool. And what you said earlier, it's timeless music. All the bands that were involved in our various scenes, people need to check it out. All you people out there, look them up, check them out. You see that GNU Fuzz shirt he's wearing? Check out GNU Fuzz and follow the rabbit hole from there on. I guarantee.
And thanks for keeping up. I think we've both been doing the Discogs update, because that's a good reference point of all the stuff that exists. And there's a few things I don't have, but most of it I have. And then there's a couple question marks. But yeah, go to our Instagram page, Monsterland 90s Band. Follow. I always post some interesting stuff of things I find and unearth. Occasionally there's somebody talking about us somewhere.
Right on. As well they should. So cool beans, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for caring, Malcolm.
Hey, I can't help it. I like Faith No More. I care a lot. I just do.
All right, thanks, man.
Anytime, man. That was Greg Vegas. I am still Malcolm Tent, and I hope to be back in about 167 hours time-ish with the next installment of Tent Talks Tunes. Do the right thing and tune into it. And stay sane, kids. That's all I ask. Stay sane. Until we meet again, this is Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.